I'm Jerry Weaver. I'm an alcoholic. Now, I can assure you I would much rather for a panel of 3 to be up here and me to be sitting over there listening. I don't know what y'all were thinking, but hey, here I am. I'm trying to recover, though. I've never vaped, but I drove down here with 3 home group members, Aaron and Jay and Julia. And Julia got to talking about boyfriends, and we were trying to help her to select a boyfriend, and she got so nervous and so worked up, she started vaping in the car. Man, I got high as a kite off the secondhand vape. I'm sure that's not true, but all I smell is vanilla spice or whatever it was. It's like all in my nose and stuff and all that, but appreciate y'all coming down here with me. Good to be here, good to be sober tonight. My sobriety date's July the 2nd, 1989. I got a home group. Home group is There Is a Solution. We meet in Holly Springs on Tuesday and Thursday night, 7 p.m. at the United Methodist Church. If you're ever in Holly Springs, come check us out. I also have a sponsor. Have been continuously sponsored for a long time. I've had 3 sponsors since I've been sober, but I've had my current sponsor for, about 31 years. That's a long time. Anyway, I'm a guy that's grateful to home group, and I'm grateful to the idea of sponsorship. It's 2 things that I've always participated in, I guess would be the right word, since I've gotten sober. And in many aspects, the person I am today is a direct result of my home group and good sponsorship. Been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't say that to impress anybody or to exclude myself from anything anybody else has going on. The only reason I say that is because Alcoholics Anonymous works. If it's if the individual works it and practices it as a way of life, you can stay sober for the rest of your life. I know we stay sober a day at a time, but the book tells me that we can have permanent sobriety if we give our life to the program, and that certainly has been my experience. Is that I had a guy tell me one time that relapse was a requirement, and that relapse really enhanced his sobriety. I'm glad it did. I don't think I'm going to try that. I don't think it's a requirement, but anyway. And I'm a guy that just if you're new here or you're wondering like why we're going to be talking about 12 concepts, I have no idea. Why a group would want to talk about the 12 concepts. I'm glad y'all are, but more importantly, what I can tell you is that before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I couldn't stay sober, and I had a lot of people try to help me get sober. I tried a lot of different ways through church and psychiatry and medications and exercise and yoga and diet, and none of it worked. Had people lay hands on me in the Pentecostal church. Been dunked in water in the Free Will Baptist church. Drunk right when I left the church, and not because that stuff didn't work. I just wasn't ready. And I started drinking when I was 12, and again, you couldn't stay sober. And one day, I was sitting in a detox, and a guy from AA came in and talked to me. And up to that point, what happened to me was no matter how hard I quit drinking on my own, I couldn't. And no matter how bad circumstances got in my life, they were not strong enough to prevent me from taking the first drink. No matter how much my mom loved me and the wife loved me and the Air Force threatened me and the Harnett County deputy threatened me, none of that stuff stopped me from taking the first drink. And when I took the first drink, I was off to the races. And the only thing changed that and stopped that was Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. The steps removed the obsession to drink and helped me to basically recreate my life. And so I'm just a guy that's grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. A little history on I'm going to get the concepts here in just a few minutes. But so if you think about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Prior to 1935, nothing really worked for an alcoholic. Right? There was really no program for an alcoholic to get sober. Some folks had gotten sober through religion. A few folks would get it through psychiatry. The book calls those folks heavy drinkers or moderate drinkers. But anyway, that worked for some people. But most alcoholics were ridiculed or outcast. They were put in jail. They were locked up. And, our two co-founders, just long story short, found out that by talking to one another and helping one another, that they were able to stay sober. They also found out that by taking a few simple steps back then, which was giving your life to God, doing a confession, making an amends to people that you've harmed, recommitting yourself to God daily, and going out and trying to be of service to other people, that they were able to stay sober. They tried that technique on some other people. They had a few successes. They tried it on a few more people. They had a few more successes. In about 3 years, they realized that they were on to something, right? They were, somebody will correct me on numbers when I'm done, but depending on what you read, they had anywhere from 40 to 100 members. And they're realizing that, hey, we're on to something. We need to do something. So they decided to write a book. And through the process of writing that book, Bill Wilson, one of our co-founders, wrote the 12 steps. Right? And the 12 steps were the combined experience of those first members of what they felt like they did in order to have a spiritual awakening and quit drinking, have the obsession removed. So they wrote the steps, they wrote the book, right? And you think about the steps, I think it's watermarked on the traditions there and the steps over here. It's the circle and the triangle. We don't use it anymore because we're so dumb we lose trademarks all the time. On the bottom of that triangle it says recovery. That's the 12 steps. So they wrote the 12 steps, and the 12 steps sustained us for a number of years, right? The book comes out in 1939. We're working steps. Groups start growing, right? Groups start kind of going all over the United States. And mid-40s, groups were having growing pains. There's no real direction from the little office that has been established in New York. People are arguing over who's going to be in charge. They're arguing over who can come, who can be a member. They're arguing over how much it costs. They're arguing over whether we're going to start, educating people and pounding legislation tables and all these things, or we're going to build hospitals. All that led to mid to late 40s are traditions. Right here. That circle and triangle that we don't use anymore. On this side over here it says unity. That's the traditions. Right? So Bill Wilson writes the traditions. The traditions were put in place to help guide groups, to give a little direction to groups on kind of how they should operate and how the fellowship can be unified. Right? Steps and traditions are basically, they shouldn't be, but in reality they're optional. You can follow them or you don't have to follow them. That's up to you. Groups don't have to follow traditions. Typically a group that doesn't follow traditions won't stay a group long. Members that don't work some form of the steps probably aren't going to stay sober. So now we got steps, we got traditions. The traditions kind of protect us from each other. The traditions kind of keep us unified. They tell us lots of things that we'll talk about in a minute from Concept 12. And basically what started to happen was, at that point, we've got all these groups. We've got a little office in New York that Bill's running. We're called that's called the Alcoholic Foundation. It wasn't General Service Office back then, or General Service Board. And there's trustees, and then there's Bill and there's Bob. And Bill Wilson started realizing that, hey, we can't run everything on our own with just these few trustees. We've got all these groups down here, and we really don't have any real connection to them. And, people start asking the questions, well, who's going to run stuff? Who's going to do this? How are we going to figure out what literature to publish and to put out? How are we going to, contact other states or other countries that want help? Things like this. And so Bill Wilson was wrestling with the idea of how do we kind of keep the fellowship alive, and how do we get all these different entities to kind of work together. And he came up with the idea of a conference. And he came up with an idea of a delegate. And the idea is that, hey, we're going to let, this is a generalization of it, we're going to let the groups run Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was kind of the general idea. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to get a delegate from each state back then, or each area, and we're going to have those delegates come into the office. We're going to hold a big conference. We're going to let them kind of inspect and look at what the office is doing, and we're going to get feedback and let them participate in the growth and kind of the maintenance of the organization. It was not completely popular with some of the trustees that were currently kind of in charge. It was not even popular with all the fellowship. They just didn't think it was going to work, or some of them didn't think it was necessary. Some people thought it looked a lot like government, representatives and senators and all that. But anyway, they trialed it in 1951, and it appeared to work. Hence, he wrote the 12 Concepts. So if you look at the circle and the triangle, over there on that side, you probably can't read it, but it says service. And so the 12 concepts came into place, and they started holding conferences. And so they hold one conference a year. It's about a week long, and they bring in delegates. The delegates represent the groups. So we've got a delegate for North Carolina that actually represents this group and all the groups in North Carolina that carry our voice to the conference. And at the conference is where they discuss and debate and talk about ideas and kind of handle things that a group couldn't. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And so I'm not an expert on concepts. I'll tell you that if you want to know more about concepts, there's a service manual that has all you want to know about concepts in the back of it. It's called 12 Concepts for World Service. There's actually a brand new service manual that just came out. I don't know if y'all know this or not, but it was part of the conference. They revamped the whole service manual. This is an old one here, but it's completely different. And you can now order it on the GSO website. So there's that right there. I'm not even going to open it tonight. Waste of time. I don't mean it that way. We just don't have time to do it. There's a pamphlet called The 12 Concepts for World Services Illustrated. Aaron's got one over there. It's a very good pamphlet. I've got one here that's just printed out in big print. I would encourage you to read that. And for people that aren't real smart like myself with that GED I got, you can, it's got pictures. So it's real easy to learn stuff on that. I'm getting way more academic than I wanted to. And then there's a checklist for concepts on the GSO website. So those are your best resources if you want to know more about concepts. Now they also, this was another advisory action from a conference. When they came out with the 4th edition of the Big Book, that's a rogue cover, but this is an official book. In the back of the Big Book, "12 Concepts for World Service," short form. So this is what I'm going to kind of refer to as we move on to it. So you'll hear, if you've been around AA for a little bit, you'll hear people talk about, hey, we got 36 principles. I've never actually read that in any AA literature. I would encourage you to try to find it. It ain't in there. But the idea of that is we got 12 steps, we got 12 traditions, and we got 12 concepts that make the circle and the triangle, right? And 12 of them are the concepts. And I'm a guy that I've tried to, as best as I can, apply traditions and apply concepts to my life. So the concepts are written really to guide our conference and to guide our service entities, which is Alcoholics Anonymous World Services and the Grapevine. Those are two separate businesses, actually. It's kind of more to instruct how those things work together and how the conference relates to the groups and to those service entities. A little complicated, I understand that. But concept 1 talks about, I'm going to read through a few of these. It talks about the final responsibility and ultimate authority for AA, world service, should always reside in the collective conscience of our whole fellowship. Keep in mind, the concepts are not legal instruments. They're more spiritual guides. The good thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is, we come here, we don't trust anybody. We're selfish and we're self-centered. Right? We always think somebody's out to get us or we're out to get somebody. And the steps and traditions and the concepts teach us to lay aside selfishness and self-centeredness. They teach us to trust in a higher power. They teach us to trust in the power of numbers. And the concepts are very much all about trusting the group conscious and even trusting an individual that you probably don't even know. We'll get to that in a minute. So the first concept is about the ultimate authority in Alcoholics Anonymous is the collective conscience of all the groups. It's not one individual. It's not the board. It's not the trustees. Legally, they have the right to do whatever they want to do, but that's never happened. Maybe a few times. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So if you've ever seen, I know y'all probably had Rachel here one time do something. She's got that big old chart. This is the only time I'm going to refer to anything. So what that's talking about is this upside down triangle. Right? So most organizations, you got a president or CEO who's kind of in charge, and you basically, everybody below them does what he or she or it tells them to do. I got my pronoun right on that, I think. In Alcoholics Anonymous, it's different. The groups are in charge. Right? Groups, districts, assemblies, general service conference, and then the office. Now, if you've never seen the upside down triangle, there it is. I'm going to explain how all that might work for you in a minute. So basically what that says is that really nobody in Alcoholics Anonymous acts alone. There's no one person that can go make a decision that's going to impact everybody. It really can't happen. 2, it says the General Service Conference of AA has become, for nearly every practical purpose, the active voice and the effective conscience of our whole society and its world affairs. So 1 and 2 are basically saying that the overall kind of guide and authority in AA is our conference. Okay? So the way that we participate in that is through a GSR. So the question on 1 and 2 would be, does our group have a GSR? And does our group have a GSR that is active in a district? Then the next question is our district active? Is the district participating in the area? So So that's how a group would participate in that. So if you don't have a GSR, I'm sure you guys have a GSR, but if you don't have a GSR, then you're basically not participating in the service structure. And that the conference is basically consists of 135 people. There'll be a little quiz afterwards on this. We got 93 delegates. Those 93 delegates are AA members that each area or each state, depending on how the area is divided up, is elected and is chosen by the groups that, hey, we want this person to represent us. There's 93 of those. There's 21 trustees. There's 14 alcoholic trustees, 7 non-alcoholic trustees. There's 6 non-trustee directors, and then there's 15 staff members that participate in the conference. So just probably worthless information for you. The important thing to note there is that the 93 delegates, which basically represent the groups, are 2/3 or more of the total vote. That's how they make that's how they kind of make the statement that the groups run AA, because there's enough delegates to outvote the trustees and the board members and the staff. So what does that look like? So here's one. So right here. So our old service manual, well, where is that service manual? I said I wasn't going to refer to it. This is just how the process works. In the service manual, there's a big circle that talks about groups, and it has positions on it, like GSR, treasurer. Then it has like area coordinator positions on it. It'll show like the corrections coordinator, CPCPI coordinator, all that. Right? It's a pie chart. In one version of the service manual several years ago, I think it was back in the 90s, might have been 2000s, they changed that chart. They took out some of the coordinators. The correctional coordinator, remember that, Wallace? Came out of it. So they published it, and there were positions missing on purpose. They decided they were going to exclude them. Your home group member right here, Wallace Bryant, noticed that it wasn't on there. This is how the upside down triangle works. I'd forgotten about this until I just saw Wallace. Wallace said, well, this is wrong. You guys need to go back to the old structure because it was more thorough and more instructive when it had those positions in it. Probably went to the district or called the delegate. I don't remember exactly who you called, but it became an agenda item. There was enough interest in it when people started talking about it, like, yeah, we need to go back to the old chart. It went through the process of going through a committee at the conference, and then it made it to the conference floor, and they voted to put I'm going to find that thing here. They voted to put it back in the service manual. Isn't that right, Wallace? Yeah. So that's an example of how groups, it's bottom up or top down, however you would look at that. If you work at a company, if you work at McDonald's and you don't like the fry oil and the French fries, and you complain to your manager that we should change, they're probably not going to change the fry oil. They're probably not going to run it up through a process. And AA would do that. Pamphlets, right? Somebody thought that we needed a pamphlet that kind of explained spirituality. So somebody took that to their district. District discussed it. Then they took it to their area. Area discussed it. They decided that they wanted to send that up, so their delegate took that to the conference. That particular one, what's that called now? Mini pass to spirituality or something like that? That got debated for years, and it kept getting shut down, and it eventually got approved. So that's another example of how groups and how individuals can kind of, make things happen in Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's just a little bit about how that process works. I'll tell you something funny. So not get it off track. Another thing you might want to get, if you're really interested in this stuff, GSO puts this out. It's all the advisory actions from every conference, dating all the way back to 1951. Listen to some of these. I found it. I forgot I had this thing. I opened it up. And look at some of the things that they were actually debating and voted on. 1961, this is a little comical. That's why I'm bringing it up. This is something that was actually voted on and approved. The conference recognizes that the publication of cheap editions of AA books would probably reduce the income to World Services and Bill W.'s personal income. This conference unanimously suggests the following to the trustees: to add a rider to Bill's royalty contract to the effect that if cheaper books are ever published, Bill's royalties be increased by an amount sufficient to keep the royalty income at the same average level it had been for 5 years before the cheaper books were published. Further, that as time goes on, if inflation erodes the purchasing power of this income, the trustees will adjust the royalties to produce the same approximate purchasing power, this to the effect during the lifetime of Bill and Lois's legacy. How about that? Isn't that funny? Look at this one now. So, if you don't know anything about AA history, there's a guy named Ebby Thatcher who helped Bill Wilson get sober. This is 1963. The conference approved the action of the General Service Board of Trustees in making a special monthly grant to Ebby Thatcher, the man who helped co-founder Bill W. achieve sobriety and who was indirectly responsible for the creation of Alcoholics Anonymous. How about that? Here's another one in 1963. You hear a lot about young people and how all that's new. 1963. The committee studied the request that a representative of the young people in AA be permitted to attend the General Service Conference as an observer. It was the feeling of the committee that all AAs in the United States and Canada are being served adequately under the existing procedure. This is some funny stuff. There was another one here. Oh yeah, listen to this one. 1958. In regard to the attitude of the movement as a whole toward the use of so-called AA chips, tokens, lapel emblems, and similar devices, the consensus was that this was a matter of local autonomy and not one which the conference should record a definite position in behalf of the movement. Since the use of tokens for sobriety is a matter of local taste and custom, there seems to be no express need at the present time for a standard token of sobriety and no need for AA Publishing Incorporated to carry such items. It's interesting. Get that if you're interested in that stuff. There's a lot more cool stuff in there. So that's a little bit how the conference works and how that process works. So if you guys wanted to change the color of the cover of the book, you could run it up through the process and do it. I want to touch on just a few other things about how I think you can apply concepts in your life and how they relate to the group. So number 3 says, to ensure effective leadership, we should endow each element of AA, the conference, the General Service Board, and its service corporations with the traditional right of decision. So basically what that's saying is that we give our leaders, we give our trusted servants what they call the right of decision. So what that would mean to the group is, if this is one example of it, if you send your GSR to the district, let's say they're talking about starting a hotline and they want groups to give money, and you guys are in favor of it. You send your GSR to go to the district to vote on that. If the GSR gets there and they get new information, like, that it's going to cost too much money, then the GSR, the group should give the GSR what they call the right of decision. So basically, the GSR gets new information, they can change their vote. Right? All that is talking about is trust and faith and letting others kind of make decisions for you. If you think about that in your personal life, so really what that says is that we're not so just rigid and hard that, no, you got to do this, do that. That really serves nobody very well. I mean, there's obviously sometimes some things where you got to dig in and stick to your guns, but in most matters in life and even in our groups, we should go at things with an open mind. We should go at things with, hey, what's best for everybody? And let's get all the information. The most important thing in a lot of this is for an informed group conscience. Things should be debated and all the information should be available to people before we make decisions. It's a good way to live your life, is to try to get all the info before you make a decision. And it's okay to change your mind. And that's kind of the essence of concept number 3, the right of decision. 4 talks about, at all responsible levels, we ought to maintain a traditional right of participation, allowing a voting representation in reasonable proportion to the responsibility that each must discharge. What that says is that we should let people participate in things. So this was originally written for the conference. When Bill came with the idea for the conference, he wanted, I told you there were 15 staff members that participate. He wanted the staff to be able to participate in the conference. He also wanted those trustees to be able to participate. Some of the delegates back then and a lot of the groups were pretty adamant that, hey, staff can't participate. They're not out here in the field. He argued that, well, they're in the office, they see stuff that you don't see, so we should let them participate. That was how it was originally, the reason it was originally in there was to let the staff and those trustees participate in the conference. But if you think about that idea about the right of participation, Bill's idea was that, hey, we're all equal. And that if we all can provide value or we've got information, we should listen to people. We should let people participate. And it's kind of like the third tradition, right? That the only requirement is a desire to stop drinking. If you've got a desire to stop drinking alcohol, you can participate in Alcoholics Anonymous. And in your group, all people's voices are important. In the group, I know sometimes it seems like one person's voice has probably got a little more sway than others, but it really shouldn't be that way, right? We're all equal. And so this says that, hey, we should let people participate. If you think about it in your personal life, for me, it's like if I'm with my family and there's kids or young people or old people, I try to listen to everybody. I try to let everybody participate. Try to keep my life like an open book, and not exclude people from stuff. Not tell this person one thing and that person another. Let everybody participate and don't exclude anyone. It's really important to do that in your group. 5 talks about what we call the right of appeal. It says, throughout our structure, a traditional right of appeal ought to prevail so that minority opinion will be heard and personal grievances receive careful consideration. Right? Kind of goes in line with tradition 2, tradition 1, right of appeal. So what this says is that, hey, we should listen to the minority opinion. And the minority opinion is just when a vote's taken, it's the losing side. It doesn't mean, a minority like in society. It's talking about whoever the losing side is that we should listen to them. So this is in place for a number of reasons. One is so a few people can't dominate things. It keeps the majority in check, because sometimes a majority can get built up and just kind of just dominate everything, and the group or anything can look one way instead of all things are completely open to people. So what this is saying is that, hey, we should give people that didn't win an opportunity to talk. We should listen to them with an open mind. This even goes as far as saying we should listen to their personal grievances. It's talking about the conference. So I kind of look at that as that it's easy sometimes to discount people, or she hadn't been here long enough. What does she have to say? We shouldn't listen to her. Or, he's relapsed 62 times. What does he have to add? Stuff like that. So personally, what I try to avoid that. Not always good at it, but what this is saying is that don't discount anybody. Learn from others. I have learned a lot from people that are completely different than me, right? But the concept kind of is trying to help us to do that. That, hey, listen to everybody. And they do that at the conference, right? We do it. Have you ever been to an assembly or a district meeting? Right? A lot of times, a vote will go one way. They'll ask for the minority. Does the minority wish to speak? Somebody from the losing side will get up and say a few words or talk, and then sometimes the conversation will change and people will start changing their vote, or they'll start changing their ideas on things. That's the ultimate kind of spiritual principle is, hey, I should be open and willing to change my point of view if I get different information, or if this is going to try to help somebody. That's really what that's talking about. And so I'm not going to go into depth on so like 6, 7, 8. It talks about the charter and really what it says now. And I don't want to change everybody's opinion about this, because you'll hear us talk in Alcoholics Anonymous about the upside down triangle, right? The groups are in charge. And it kind of implies that, hey, everything that GSO does, everything that AA does comes through the groups. It's not true. It sounds like that. It's not true. It's true in the sense that if you want to change something, there's a process for you to do that. But legally, our trustees and our board can do whatever they want to do legally, because of the concepts and because of our 2 bylaws and our charter. Now, spiritually, it's never really happened. But that's kind of what 6, 7, and 8 talk about. It talks about the charter being a legal document, and trustees and directors have fiscal and administrative oversight of everything that happens. And they really need to, because we can't look at that stuff and run that stuff from here. So basically what that's saying is that, hey, we're going to trust you guys to run the day-to-day operations. We're going to trust you guys to look at our finances and take care of things that a group can't. And that's really how it should be. Here's a good example of how it works and how it doesn't work. A few years ago, some of y'all will probably remember this, the original manuscript to the Big Book. I'm just going to generalize this. There was arguments over who it belonged to. Well, a private individual had it, and he was getting ready to auction it off for a large sum of money. Our GSO staff and our trustees and directors found out about that, and the trustees and the board and the general service manager on a conference call made a decision to take legal action against this guy. If you've been around AA at all, you know that we don't do that. right? We just try to avoid that kind of controversy. The board had absolute legal authority to do that, based on concepts and based on our charter. The fellowship didn't think they did. They thought that that's another one of those things where they thought, you got to run that through the fellowship before you make that decision. Well, no, they can basically do what they want to do. So they made that decision to take legal action on this guy. Well, the fellowship started finding out about it. And again, remember, they had legal authority to do that. It probably wasn't in line with our traditions, but they had legal authority to do it. So the fellowship found out about it. Word starts getting around of what happened, and members and groups start complaining about it or saying, hey, this is not right. Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? Why didn't you run that through? Well, they technically didn't have to run it through the groups, through the conference. They just don't have to do that. But there was enough support to stop that action that the groups, through our delegates, basically said, hey, you can't do this. The fellowship's not in favor of it. And they basically stopped the action. So that's kind of an example of where the board can do what they want to do, but legally, but spiritually, the fellowship didn't think it was right. And the spiritual action trumped the legal action. And the trustees had to reverse what they did. Hopefully that made sense to you. Now, it costs us a lot of money to back out all that, but we didn't want to get caught up in court. It also tells us that 9 and 10 talk about that we're basically not a second-rate organization. So on our board and all of our staff, we hire talented people. We hire people that have skills. We hire people that want to do the job, and we pay them well. And it talks about how we should have good members on our board. We should have good trustees. We should have good staff members. A lot of people think that we're kind of a second-rate organization, and we do it a lot in our groups, right? We'll have service positions. Oh, just Grasshopper went to the bathroom. Let's give him the position, right? So the way that 9 would work, 10 would work in your group is we should put people in positions that want to do them. We should put people in positions that have time to do them. We should put people in positions that maybe have some skills to do some of that work. And a lot of times what we'll do is somebody hadn't been in the group in several months. Well, let's give him the job. It'll get him involved. Well, no, I've never seen that work. You got to give somebody that's already involved the job, and that's what we should do. I'm going to jump down to 12, and we're going to wrap this thing up. I'm going to read 12, because really what the concepts are, they're just a kind of the traditions on steroids. It basically says we're going to trust our delegate, we're going to trust the group conscience, and we're going to trust God to take care of Alcoholics Anonymous. So number 12 says, the conference shall observe the spirit of AA tradition, taking care that it never becomes the seat of perilous wealth or power. So the conference has no power over us. They can make whatever decisions they want to. They can't tell you what to do. You can, in a sense, tell them what to do. It's kind of interesting. Through your pocketbook or through your GSR. But the conference never has any power over anybody, and the conference doesn't accumulate wealth. Kind of like a group should be. Right? A group shouldn't have any domination or power over its members, and you shouldn't have a lot of money. Sufficient operating funds and reserve be its prudent financial principle. Right? So the conference has just enough money to get around and get by, and they don't accumulate a whole lot of money. GSO the same way. Well, you could argue that, but they've got operating funds and then a prudent reserve. that it placed none of its members in a position of unqualified authority over others. Right? So the conference doesn't have any authority over us. Nobody in our group should have authority over a member. Right? If we've taken that third step in our personal lives, we shouldn't feel like we've got any authority over people in our lives. Right? We're not the governor of anybody's lives anymore. I've quit fighting anything or anybody. That's what this is talking about. That it reach all important decisions by discussion, vote, and whenever possible by substantial unanimity. So the conference, make sure that it has lots of discussion. That's why it's got 2 committees it goes through before it gets to the floor. And they have to have 2/3 vote for anything to be approved. Groups should do that. If we have a serious issue we're discussing, we should make sure there's lots of discussion on it before anybody makes a motion. We should make sure all the facts are on the table before anybody makes a motion. We should make sure that we have a 2/3 vote before anything gets implemented. Personally, it's also always good for me to try to get all the facts before I just fly off the handle about stuff, right? I mean, I'm quick to react. Its actions never be personally punitive, nor an incitement to public controversy. You could debate whether they've been doing that or not. So the conference can't do anything that's going to be punitive to any of us, and they should try to stay out of public controversy. Hence, why they shouldn't have taken that guy to court. That's a public record, and then there's controversy about that. We should try to stay out of public controversy. Meaning, if I'm practicing spiritual principles, I'm probably going to stay out of public controversy. That it never perform acts of government, and that like the society it serves, it will always remain democratic in thought and action. So basically, the conference and the concepts serve us. They serve the fellowship, not the other way around. And really what this is talking about, if we're going to treat people, if we're going to be democratic in thought and action, we should be treating people equally, right? We should be treating people with respect and with dignity. The new guy and the old guy, right? The lady that's relapsing and the lady that's been here forever. We should treat them all the same, treat them all equally. And so that's basically the concepts. And a real quick thing, they're pretty interesting. If you've never really spent any time looking at them, I would encourage you to look at them. The illustrated pamphlet is really good. But they're basically here to make sure that Alcoholics Anonymous stays around forever. And they're here to make sure that no 1 or 2 people are running things, and that everybody has a voice. And it doesn't always seem like it, but the reality is everybody does have a voice. And that if you need something, or if you think something needs to be changed in our fellowship, there's processes and there's ways to make that happen, or to get that discussion going. I think that's it. I think I'm going to shut it down. It's probably time. And I appreciate y'all listening to me. Thank you.